Hi, and welcome to Bath's Teams Conversations. This will involve me and a couple of ambassadors discussing various topics around university, such as what is university, looking at applying and choosing a university, as well as talking about what life is like at the University of Bath. In this video, we'll be talking about activities to mention in your personal statement. We'll talk a bit about what we wrote in our personal statements, what types of activities we got up to, what we found quite valuable for our personal statement, as well as some recommendations for what you should be doing now to enhance your personal statement. We'll also talk a bit about different experiences that may not seem immediately relevant to your application and how to make them a bit more relevant to your application. We hope you find this video useful. I'm Callie Rice, and I'm the Student Recruitment Assistant here at the University of Bath. I myself was a student for 4 years, and I studied biology as my undergraduate degree at Bath. Today I'm joined by 3 ambassadors. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Mackyla, and I study social sciences here at Bath. I'm a third-year student and I'm on my placement year.
Hi, I'm Anthony. I'm a second-year physics student on the 4-year integrated masters with astrophysics. And yeah.
And I'm Sarah. I'm a second-year education with psychology student here at Bath.
What kind of activities did you write about in your personal statements?
I tried to write about any experience I'd done that was relevant to my course. So because I'm doing education with psychology, we focus on kind of the issues that impact young people. So I'd done a few weeks of work experience in a school, a few weeks of work experience in a school for kids that had been excluded from mainstream education. So I wrote about that quite a lot and how I felt that had influenced my decision and what I'd learned from that. I touched on anything that I'd done that was relevant, kind of work with kids and young people or psychology-based projects, things like that. But then I also talked about things that I'd done that I thought had taught me useful skills that would help me at university. So like I'd done Duke of Edinburgh, so I mentioned that. You don't get loads of words in your personal statement, so you don't need to write about everything you've ever done. So you need to kind of pick and zoom in on important things that you've done that you've really learned from or that link to your course and say how that's helped you. Don't just put it in and explain why you've put it in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was the same with me. So I basically linked all of the work experience that I'd had previously. So I'd worked in like the co-op, I also worked at like a fast food restaurant, and I worked at a pub, and I basically linked that to all of the social sciences somewhere or another. So I feel like any work experience is relevant, and you can link it in some way, even if it's just to show that you've got like good people skills and you can work well in a group. So yeah, I also mentioned things like extracurricular activities. I mentioned like charity work that I'd done. So basically, if you can think of like any big events in your life that could relate to your subject, mention that as well.
In terms of my personal statement, I decided to talk about the work experience that I'd done, even though only one of the work experiences that I'd actually undertaken was relevant to physics. So I did I think it was like a 1 week long undergraduate level kind of team exercise at a university. I applied for that I think it was towards the end of my GCSEs, and so I started that coming into A2s. That was over the summer between GCSEs and A2s, and that was really fun, and it further made me kind of want to study physics because it was very interesting to me, and it made me cement my ideas that this is what I want to go into, and I might want to try maybe research or something along that lines. But before that, when you do maybe work experience at school or work experience across the summer, I'd also gone to a chemistry camp up in Nottingham. I'd gone done work at a pharmaceutical company, shadowing some of them in a hospital. So doing just anything that you can get through family contacts and advice, through networks in your area, your school, online. You can apply for lots of different types of work experience across loads of different domains and fields. Even though they might not be what you end up studying, they teach you stuff about real world experience, the workplace, research, working in teams, leadership, so many things, and they're always useful to mention.
Also, if your school offers an EPQ, I don't think mine did, but they're also really, really helpful because you can focus that. So the EPQ is basically an extended project qualification, and it's like a dissertation kind of, but you can also do other kinds of assessment.
You can do some cool things.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know someone that put on a musical for their EPQ. It's quite flexible.
My friend built a robot. He built a tracked kind of car, but it tracked you. So like he took apart a TV remote and took the infrared sensor out of it and had this little remote control kind of tank treaded car follow him around his room and stuff like that, which was really impressive. And then he just had to write up a little basic report about how he'd gone about programming and putting it together.
Yeah.
And it makes the grades easier. It helps you get into uni. Might as well. Something fun.
If you get like an A in your EPQ, at Bath they lower one entry requirement. So say if you needed like 3 A's, they do 2 A's and a B. So obviously if you do the EPQ in relation to the subject you want to study, that's also really going to help, because you can mention that like in your personal statement, talk a little bit about that, and it shows that you are actually like passionate about that subject. So yeah, and it can be quite fun. So if your school does offer an EPQ, then I definitely recommend doing that.
And also, if you've read any books that link to the subject you want to study, that's another way of showing that you are actually passionate about your subject. And make sure you've actually read them, because if you do have an interview, which some courses do, they can ask you about them. But yeah, if you put like what you learnt from that book, that's another really useful way of showing that actually you are interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So some people talk about not actually being able to get some work experience in the area. So they ask like, what else can they do? And actually things like reading books. And there are also things like journals online. If you're interested in something scientific, those kind of things, just showing that you're kind of actively engaged in the subject. You don't necessarily have to be out there doing actual work experience or anything, because especially difficult in some particular areas, for example, that maybe don't have the right facilities available for you, or they just don't accept under 18s, for example. So just any way you can show that you're engaged. I know some students who are interested in things like business and management have done like little enterprise type group projects as well. So there are sometimes little things like that that might be available at your school, or might be available at other local schools that maybe you could ask about, or just any sort of local business sometimes runs those kind of things as well.
Relating to the sciences, you can look at Nuffield and Salters. Salters are a chemical company who do chemistry camps for people pre-GCSEs or pre-A levels, and those they put you up in university accommodation, and they also try to weight applications towards those who don't get that sort of in that area. They don't get that opportunity. And Nuffield does it, I think, for all 3 scientific domains. They have them across the country in different research facilities, and some of them pay, some of them don't. I think they're usually unpaid, week-long sort of things. And again, they weight it towards people who might not get such opportunities.
We do actually have some summer schools at Bath as well, so that we do some summer residentials, and those are involved. I think we have like a sciencey, maths and engineering type one, and a more sort of humanities and social sciences type one. So at Bath we have some as examples, but I'm pretty sure a lot of universities are opening up their doors and having students come, sixth formers come, and just have a taste of university life as well as their subject. So you can write about that both like academically, like I got to speak to some lecturers in biology and they taught me about some really cool facts about evolution that I'm really interested in, or I could just be talking about I've had a taster of being a student at university and I know it's something that I would enjoy and something that I would really like to get involved with. So things like summer schools can actually be really, really beneficial as well. So there are longer opportunities like that rather than just like days of work shadowing or just reading books as well. So there's actually loads of things out that you can get involved with.
There's also a website called Future Learn, and basically you can do things called MOOCs, where it's basically a massive online open course, and it's universities around the world put on like 3-week courses, and you usually have to spend like 3 hours per week on that course, and most of them are for free, and you can focus that on a subject of your interest. And if you get the chance to do that over the summer, that's really great because it might take up some time, but afterwards you can get like a certificate that says that you've studied at that university, so that's also really good to put in your like personal statement.
Yeah, I did a couple of those. I'd forgotten about that, but yeah, I did.
Which ones did you do?
I can't remember. There was one about accessibility of education, and I did a psychology one.
Did any of you have any part-time work? So maybe just something like working in a restaurant or retail or something. Did anybody put anything like that in their personal statements?
I did, yeah. I worked at a tutoring centre 2 days a week, so that was quite relevant to my course because I was able to say that I'd worked teaching English and maths to kids of a range of ages. So I talked about that, but I also talked about the kind of life skills it had taught me because I was dealing with parents and their queries and I was taking payments. So yeah, I definitely feel like that did help me with a range of skills, and I did talk about that in my personal statement.
Yeah, I also worked in retail, so I worked at the co-op, and then the summer before I worked with NCS, and that's the National Citizenship Service. I worked with the teenagers, basically just mentoring them. So week 1 was like camping, second week was in university halls, where you did like loads of cool like entrepreneurial tasks. Third week was planning for the fourth week, which was working for a charity, like volunteering and raising money, basically. So that's another good thing that you could do.
So there are some courses like medicine and veterinary science that do actually ask for some work experience. And I actually got a lot of work experience in the area of veterinary science because I was originally interested in becoming a vet. So I did about 6 weeks of work experience at vets. I also did some work in like a dairy farm. I also went to a sort of summer school type thing for vet students as well. So learning a lot about that. But as a result of a lot of those experiences, I actually decided that wasn't for me. So actually getting work experience is not only valuable for necessarily your personal statement, but actually finding out more about the subject itself. Because if I hadn't done all that work experience, I probably would have just stuck with, oh yeah, being a vet sounds really cool, I'm going to go for it. And then finding that out maybe a year or two into university, which would have been a bit of a shock to the system, I imagine. So I'm quite glad that I tried it out and decided to change my mind. But then I could still talk about that experience because I could talk about the fact that I'd gone out there, I'd spent my time sort of like looking into subjects and actually decided that from that, it wasn't necessarily the vet side that I liked, it was more the biology behind it. So I was able to tie that back into my subject. So even if you do sort of change your mind, you can still add bits in like that and sort of talk about how it sort of developed your interest in particular subjects and maybe how it made you change your mind, but it also shows that you sort of took the initiative to go out there and get some work experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
What would your advice be to anyone that doesn't have any work experience in the area? What do you think they should write about in their personal statement, or what should they do?
I don't think you should worry if you don't have any work experience, just because there are a lot of things that you can do instead, like the things we've already mentioned. So don't worry too much, because I know especially some international students, they're physically just not allowed to do work experience. So don't panic. Obviously, if you just make sure you show your passion in your subject, link everything that you've done back to the subject, talk about all the extracurricular activities, reading. Yeah, I can't think of anything else that you can do, but as long as you're passionate about the subject, then you should be fine, and obviously focus on your grades as well.
Thanks for listening to another Teams Bath conversation session. Today we talked about what activities are useful for your application. So obvious things like work experience, but actually there's a lot more out there that you could get involved with. Things like MOOCs, so online courses, could be reading books, reading journals, getting some sort of experience perhaps from the universities themselves. There's a lot of summer schools out there these days as well. So actually there are a lot of different activities that you can try and get involved with that you can then add to your personal statement to talk about when you're applying to university. We hope that session was useful for you guys, and otherwise we'll see you again in another Teams Bath conversation session. Thank you very much.